Actually, I don't know. This is clap. This, the guy that said clapping is better. Okay.
Just the thing is, syncing the clap is a bit different with syncing the thing.
Okay. That
I usually go
he
like,
recommended.
I always do 3
Okay.
claps.
Okay. Okay. All right.
All right.
Okay. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce Mr. Greg Samborski.
Yeah,
Is that right?
Samborski, Greg Samborski.
Yeah. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah,
Hello,
well-
world.
oh wait, I should wear the headphone. Well, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Greg Samborski. I am a Canadian in South Korea right now. My profession is a professional photographer. I do commercial work, but it's not limited to commercial work. For some people who say, well, what's commercial photography? That's usually doing work for corporations and companies. So could be commercial headshots, could be interiors, exteriors, product, but it also can be events and that kind of thing. And then I also do portraits, families, engagements. I've done weddings. I've even taken photos of babies, and I don't do photos of babies anymore.
Oh, you.
'Cause
Yeah.
it's not for me. So I found a couple of genres that I don't like. And in my personal life, I have a wife. I have a daughter who's 12 years old, and I'm a dirt biker. I absolutely adore dirt biking. That's probably the only thing I like almost as much as photography. Or no, maybe more. I don't know anymore. They're like this
Mm.
much. Dirt biking, photography. I love them
I
both.
heard you combined them both, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the dream now, is to do photography only of dirt biking.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. That's amazing. Well, this podcast is about like the childhood and like college and the youth of someone to understand how they went from point A to point B where you are currently,
Sure.
having commercial projects with Chanel, Dior, Netflix, and all that.
Wow,
Nice.
you did your research.
The Four Seasons as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Booking. Don't
I-
forget Airbnb.
Yeah.
And Turkish Airlines.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. So, could you just when you were, do you remember any memories or heard of anything from your family when you were 1 to like 6-year-old? How you were raised?
Funny enough, I always say to people, like, I don't feel like I remember very much of my early years of childhood. I have this memory of, a little coat hanger in my room that scared me because it had a marble eye and I'd see it in the dark. I have this memory. I know that we lived in a very rural area. So I was born in a town called Nanaimo, and Nanaimo's on Vancouver Island. And, population of like maybe 100,000, maybe 50,000. It was very small. And I kind of grew up as mostly in the countryside, I'd say. I was never really an urban guy. We always had a few acres, like 5 acres of land, 2 older sisters. And my mom and dad were very much creative people themselves. Both of them were teachers. My mom was an English teacher. My dad was a history teacher. My dad eventually became a superintendent of school districts. And my dad and mom both loved to cook. My mom is a writer. My dad appreciates art and music. And then my sister learned to act. She was acting. And my other sister was also an artist, actually. And I have 2 sisters. One of them's a singer, songwriter, and an actor. And the other one's mostly works with horses these days. And her job's really hard to explain. But so, yeah, my whole family's pretty creative, I'd say.
Artsy.
Artsy.
Yeah.
We're pretty artsy.
I mean, I understand why you get photography then.
Yeah. I don't know. We all kind of followed our passion, and that was what my parents. I remember, at those young years, we weren't really talking about what we wanted to do. They always wanted me to go to university or college. That wasn't really an option not to do in my family. Therefore, I never thought about like doing a trade or doing some of the other cool jobs that were out there. I'm just like, oh, I better get a degree. But yeah, we grew up in I had a good life as a kid growing up. I was lucky.
Yeah. And do you think like the not urban, right?
Yeah, urban.
Urban environment like was beneficial in your upbringing?
Well, like the most urban place I kind of lived. Okay, so I was on Vancouver Island, and then we went to this super rural place called Bella Coola.
I mean rural, yeah.
Oh yeah, rural. Yeah, so we went to this really rural place called Bella Coola, and I think it gave me an appreciation for the outdoors. I think Bella Coola might have had I'm just really guessing at the population, but it was the kind of town that had one traffic light and, the grizzly bears walking around. And it was a huge like fishing area. And then eventually my mom and dad divorced and my mom ended up moving to Vancouver area. So I lived with her for a little bit in Vancouver. And then we moved to Armstrong, which we had 5 acres of land and my sister had horses on this land and we had dogs. And so I had a very like nature, an upbringing filled with nature and animals and stuff. And yeah, I think that changes who you are.
Yeah, I can clearly see bears just roaming around. Yeah, the place looks amazing, to be honest.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, are you looking at Bella Coola?
Yeah, I'm looking at
Yeah,
Bella Coola right
both of
now.
us actually, we come from Central Asia, and if I recall properly, we both have grown up in a rural environment at some point in our lives. Every summer break, we go back, and I think it's contributed to a lot of the confidence and hard work we're trying to do at a very
Right,
young age.
right.
So, yeah,
I,
definitely.
I feel like you see it with people, being in Seoul. So many people were born and raised and grew up here, and I noticed it with my own daughter, even just living in Korea. She had a certain fear of nature. I started getting fearful. Like we'd go home and it would be dark, like pitch dark, and my wife and I are like, "Oh my gosh, we can't see anymore." And you'd hear something in the bushes, and you'd be like, because we become so urbanized that we weren't used to darkness and weird noises and things like that. So
Yeah, people are afraid of spiders usually.
yeah,
Usually in urban areas, actually.
totally.
People that come from rural areas, they're like, "Oh, look, it's a spider. How cute."
Yeah, right. And here, when I teach students and they'd see a spider, like everybody would sit up on their chairs or stand on their desks, and there would just be like
Yeah.
chaos
Yeah.
in the classroom.
Yeah, yesterday I was in a coffee shop and I was just sitting, and suddenly they just both stood up, and I was like, "What is happening?" And then it's just a spider, a
And
small
you're like,
spider.
okay.
But yeah, continuing on, like,
Mm.
so could you kind of like your elementary school to like middle school, right? Just explain what you kind of did, and then like give one cool story you had.
Okay. So elementary school, yeah, basically starts at grade 4 for me when I really start remembering it well. I remember, at least my sister tells me the story of my mouth. My teacher apparently had a pretty bad grade 2 teacher, a grade 1 teacher, and she got so annoyed with me, like always talking in class, she taped my mouth shut, and
That's legal.
I should say her
definitely.
name on here.
Yeah, that's true.
And after that, I went into high school. Like I spent middle school in Switzerland actually, because my mom ended up moving out to Switzerland. She married a Swiss guy when she remarried. So that was a really cool experience. I moved to a small town called Aarau, where I learned Swiss German and there were really no foreigners there, no English speakers. So my friends were Swiss. And there I have quite a few stories of I got into a lot of trouble as a kid. I was obsessed with, I liked fire. I was a bit of a pyromaniac and I liked.
Relatable.
Alner, could you just share one story you had in your childhood? One of many atrocities you've committed.
Yes, do tell.
Okay. So let's see. Oh, actually, a year ago, I went back to my home country and we planned a camping trip. It was to the mountains, and near there was these scientific research areas with like a big telescope.
Okay.
It was like a prohibited area, and there was guards. So one day, in the morning, me and my friends decide to climb under the barbed wires
Mhm.
and get into that facility. Well, I mean, everything turned out great eventually, but yeah, that was something that was probably it was a government facility, so I would say a trespassing.
And did you get caught?
Yeah, we did get caught. They just said go back,
Oh,
but
good.
people were serious there. They were armed, so
Oh, wow. Oh,
Mm.
wow.
that's something.
Yeah. You were saying about as a kid you were pretty like.
Yeah, so I liked fire and I liked firearms too. I really had a thing for guns, but not real guns. I mean, sure, real guns would have been fun, but not because I wanted to kill people. I just liked going and shooting
Shooting
stuff
stuff,
in the
yeah.
forest, right? So we would when I was actually we'd go into the dumpsters and we'd find cans of old soup and things like that, and we'd want to shoot those. But before I could buy real guns, I used to get like pellet guns, and those ones that like little BB
Yeah, yeah.
airsoft
Yeah.
guns. Yeah, so and then one day, of course, I wanted to show it to my friends, and I brought it on a camping trip with the school camping trip. But this was a really nice one. This was now a pellet gun, and I'm like, yeah, look at this cool pellet gun. And one of my friends is like, yeah, can I shoot it? And I'm like, oh, okay. And we opened the tent, and he shot it outside the tent at something, and a teacher heard it. And I'd already gotten in trouble with some of the stuff before, and he came in and he like just grabbed the gun and he
It's-
threw it in the campfire. And this was like
Oh.
I'd saved for like 6 months for this thing. It was like $200, and that took me a long time as a kid to make
Yeah.
$200. That's a lot of money. And he just chucked it in a campfire and burned it. And my parents didn't care; they were happy about it, And the principal, everybody was happy that it happened, except me.
Except you, right?
Yeah, so I got in a lot. So this was, but I wasn't just in every other way. I was a good kid. It's not like I was trying to hurt people. I just liked playing with dangerous things. So
Mm,
Ain't we all?
yeah,
yeah.
you too.
Yeah, tell us the story.
You
Ellen.
got. I mean, it's kind of a boy thing, no?
Yeah, boy thing.
You got the story, Ellen?
I suppose like when I was young, I liked robotics and stuff, and I got this. I got this. What was it? Container of lead, and I got like other metals, and I burned it at 300 degrees. I researched about wearing a mask, but I think it might have caused me to lower my lifespan because I wanted to build some cool stuff, and I might have like. I went to pretty sketchy places when I was young. I shouldn't have.
So you got like some lead poisoning or something
No,
from burning
not
it?
lead, but I think it's probably like some metal or plastic going inside.
Yeah,
Because I was like, why not?
yeah, yeah.
But
Fun.
and I also here's a scar I burned. It was 4 or 5 years ago when I was using hot glue.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
this is really hot glue.
yeah. Well,
Nice pun.
yeah. Well, you said you start remembering after 4th grade, right?
Yeah.
So then I think for us at least, high school has been a pretty we've changed a lot. We finally realized we actually exist and things kind of matter,
Yeah.
and we start kind of questioning. How was your high school journey?
My high school journey was a little weird because after I left Switzerland when I was 16 years old. So I'd spent 4 years from basically 12 years old to 16 in Switzerland. And those are formative years for a kid, right? Like a lot happens from 12 to 16. You start basically like puberty, sexuality, drugs, drinking, like all these kinds of things. And then when I went back to Canada, I went from Switzerland where all of the community and the way, like the slang, the way of talking about those things, drinking with your friends was more common there because they are not as strict about the age limit. So you could go
Really?
have a drink.
Uh,
Mm.
I thought Canada was like US. Like you didn't have a lot of regulations.
Oh, so yeah, Canada was like more, you got to be 19 and they check your ID, right?
Uh-huh.
So if you ever
I
want to
see.
have a cigarette or a drink in Canada, as a kid, it was really hard because they were super strict about those kinds of things. But in Switzerland, I actually went to the bar when I was like, I think I was 15 years old, and because my friends were usually older than me, and I wanted to have a beer, and the bartender's like, "How old are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'm 15." And he's like, "You can't have a beer," but he mixed me half 7-Up, half beer, so he gave me like a half and half, and this was totally fine there. But in Canada, they could never do that, and I knew all the slang, and I was in that culture. So when I went to Canada, it was a very different culture to like readapt to. And a lot of time, actually, I didn't even know what some of the kids in high school were talking about because I didn't know that vocabulary yet because I'd been out of the country. So I went to grade 10 and 11 and 12 in Victoria, BC. And I would say like my high school was kind of uneventful, like I did what I needed. I passed, I got decent grades. I made some decent friends, but it definitely wasn't like a standout time of my life. I was not an honor roll kind of student, but nor was I like a dropout. I was just kind of middle of the road in high school.
Do you still keep in contact with your friends that you made in high school?
I have I have a friend from grade 4 we still talk to this day. He's my oldest friend, and his name's Brandon, and we go way back. It's fun. And I have a couple friends like remaining from high school, but we don't talk that often anymore. Like those relationships are almost kind of gone. The next oldest friend would probably be like university.
Interesting. So high school you said was pretty uneventful, but So you were kind of not not like a loser or like bullied, or you weren't like the cool kid. You're just kind of in the middle, just chilling. Would you say?
I
Just an
felt like I
average
like
kid.
pretty gray man. Yeah, just average, I'd say.
Did you do any of photography or dirt biking that you do right now?
No, no. So when I was in high school, I don't think I had that much. My regret about all those years is not having joined more team sports, not having been involved in more. Like I wish I'd gotten involved, but I kind of went. I did my school, and then afterwards I'd hang out with friends, and we just like my buddy Tom and I, we'd go to his house. We might have we probably smoking weed. Can we talk about that? I mean, it's Canada.
Yeah, yeah,
So we're smoking weed and just like making stuff. We used to make a lot of music on his computer. So we go to his house after school, and then there was this program called Fruity Loops, and we'd sit there and make beats and like put techno basically and put stuff over top of it. Yeah.
Is it like Garage Band these days?
It's like GarageBand, exactly, but it was a more primitive version, and you just like tap in and we'd spend whole days just doing this. This would be weekend projects. We'd also mix and DJ. I had a couple turntables. And we'd also play in Photoshop, like the original Photoshop 1.0, morphing faces and doing things and
yeah.
looking at the dark net and just like, yeah, just spend our
Casual
time
teenager
that
stuff.
way. Yeah, casual teenager stuff.
Hmm. Interesting, because a lot of people I've been meeting, or at least in high school, they were all like kind of had something going, and then later on they kind of developed it, or morphed it. But would you say the music then kind of morphed into what you're doing, because it's creative thing to do?
Yeah, I think at the time, like I wanted to get into sound production. I wanted to be an audio engineer, or do Foley recording, and so I was really into music production, and I was really into just yeah, doing anything I could related to music. That was a big outlet for me. And so like we do it on the computer, or my friends would come over to my house and I had two turntables and a mixer set up, and we would spend like 5 hours at night just mixing, and each of us take turns on the decks. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And would you say the highlight of your high school? What would you say? What highlight? You said it's pretty uneventful, but is there any one highlight you'd say, like your senior prom?
Or
Hmm.
like, what did you do after? Maybe the breaks.
The breaks. I don't think I have I can't think of a thing that was like amazing about high school. Like the friendships, I guess. That was for me, it was more of a social thing. I had one teacher that I kind of remember. Funny enough, he was my law teacher. So I was taking, law in grade 12, one of my electives.
Mm.
And I was doing well at that class. I kind of enjoyed it. And ultimately, my doing well in that class is probably why I went on to study it. So I went on to get my BA in criminal justice, and I ca-
Criminal justice.
yeah, so I studied criminal
Hey,
justice for
Honor, you
4
gotta
years.
watch out, man. You gotta watch out.
And the photographer.
Oh, actually, I could say like one eventful thing is I joined the military while I was in high school. So you can join the reserves at 16. So the reserves is a part-time military, right?
Yeah.
So I joined the Canadian Scottish Regiment, which was a infantry regiment. I wanted to go infantry because then I could use guns and
Guns, yeah.
grenades, right?
Yeah.
And but we're a Scottish regiment, so when we're not in uniform, we used to wear kilts. So that was kind of cool.
Kilts.
And I went away to basic training. I did my QL3. So like a big part of my high school life was showing up at the military and going for training. And I really enjoyed it. At the time, it was awesome. I met great friends, and we'd go away, and it was like every weekend or every other weekend you go on exercise and live in the field. And
Yeah.
yeah. Did you guys have to do any military?
Not military, but I chose to kind of pursue MMA since when I was
Yeah.
13. I trained I trained 4 or 5 hours very hard. I trained with professionals. And I was gonna join a pro team until like COVID and all that thing happened. But
From 13, that's a young
yeah,
age to
yeah,
start.
I just went in, and the first day this very big black dude sat on me, and then I wrestled with other people. But something in me just was like, man, the coach is nice. I want to kind of build myself. I felt very weak, so
Mm.
I can kind of see how military was. Well, did you join military because of that reason, or was there, or just guns?
I joined it for a few reasons. One, we got paid.
Mhm.
So it was a really good way to make extra money. It was actually pretty good pay considering you could either work minimum wage, which at the time was like $8 an hour. I think now it's 15. So it shows you how old I am. And yeah, so you can make good money, especially when you went away. Plus, I wanted to get strong. I wanted to fit. I wanted the challenge. So yeah, and plus then I could play with all those things that I want, the toys at the time that I wanted to play with. Because I was also at the time kind of wanting to go, like I thought I might want to go SWAT team or something like that. Uh, yeah,
Mm,
special forces, but I don't think I have the temperament to go special forces.
I see.
Yeah.
So for how
Um,
long did you do the military?
I did it for 7 years, I think.
oh.
Yeah.
7 years.
Yeah, but again, it was like so it was part
Part
time.
time.
Yeah, so then you would usually go. I think the obligation was like 1 or 2 weekends a month. Like every Thursday, you go in Thursday night for training. Then you would do 1 or 2 weekends a month of actual like field craft, and then on the summer vacations, you'd go away for like 1 to 2 months of training.
That,
Mm.
that's quite reasonable.
Yeah,
Yeah, especially you get paid, you get all those perks, and plus you get to have fun.
yeah.
So guys, join the military. Uncle
Oh,
Sam's waiting.
wait, depending on what country though.
Depends what
Depending on
country you're in.
country, yes.
Canadian military is probably
Ah, it's not Uncle Sam.
pretty
yeah.
chill.
It's a yeah.
I mean, American one is great too.
Yeah.
American one's great.
We used to train with the Americans sometimes, like we do joint training together. So we were told, I don't know if this is true or not, but the Canadian military was actually better prepared in some ways because I know. I mean, they have more stuff, but we were more diversified because we had such a lack of stuff in our military. We had to learn how to do everything with
You had to
very
improvise.
minimal. Yeah, we had to improvise. Yeah.
Mm.
We heard a rumor like, oh yeah, if you need to change a light bulb on a Jeep or something, there's a guy who needs to do that job. And it's like, no, you must use the light bulb changer. I could be completely wrong, but we like to believe though that's the case.
But yeah. So high school, right? So while you were going through, you'd probably be kind of anxious, like most people, like what will happen afterwards, what you're gonna do. So could you kind of go through that? And also the day when you graduated, what was it like?
The day I graduated high school, it was nice to be done. Like I was happy and I was excited to go to university because I think some of my classmates were going, and that was a nice idea. And it also was the idea that soon I'd be able to move out of home, and I really wanted to move out of my home. It was good, but I wanted more freedom because I felt like restricted growing up. So yeah, I got out of high school and went to university in the same town. But after I did 1 year of that university, I moved away from my home and in with Brandon, my best friend at the time, and we shared a house together for a year. And then after that, I went to a different town and completed my last 2 years of university. I guess I should mention in between there. So I did 2 years of university, and then I took a break. I went pipelining up north in Fort St. John. So I was helping welders, pipe fitters, swampers, doing like manual labor in the oil fields.
For a year.
Yeah, about a year because the money was really good up there. You could make like $25 an hour, and then double time. If you worked over, you could make like $30-40 an hour. So I saved up a bunch of money, and then I went to Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia for 6 months of backpacking, and then I went back to school. And my dad was really, really worried about this plan because he's thought that if I left school, I would never go back and finish my degree. I think he trusted that I would, but he was worried that that could happen.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question? Because I
Yeah,
feel like
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
getting
No,
off
no, no,
topic.
it's definitely. You said about the traveling. I think we'll get to that later.
Okay.
But the early parts of, so you went so before you went into college, you didn't take a gap year. You just went
No,
straight
I
in?
went straight
Went
into
straight to
college. Yeah.
college. But you went to pipelining later on.
Yeah. And then I took after 2 years of university when I had to transition from one college to the other because my college would only do the first 2 years. That's when I did my gap year.
As a criminal justice degree, why did you want to go pipelining?
Because at the time I wanted to just my dad was living up north and he had told me about it. It was something he did as a kid, and I wanted to make money fast to pay off student loans because I had to pay for quite a bit of my own education. And then I also wanted to travel, so it was just basically a fast way to go make money.
Was it fun?
Yeah, I have like some of my best memories are on that job. Like they gave me so remember I was saying I was a pyro, right? They
Yeah.
gave me a job one day. They said, "Okay, Greg, we need you to take this truck and we need you to go set fire to all these bush piles because they chopped down the
Oh,
bushes. So you would just take a bunch of diesel and spray it all over these piles and then set it on fire. And I
Burn.
was getting paid to go do this. And then I had other days, and then there were brutal days too. There were days where I was like up to here in mud, because they had a broken pipe that they needed to fix, and we're trying to put, like, I was the guy who had to get in the hole and put a what do they call it, like a rope under it basically to hoist it up, and then they'd fix it. And so, some days were like dreamy and you could just lie on the grass and because you're waiting for things to happen, getting paid, and other days where
Harsh.
you worked hard, and it could get up to I worked in minus 35. Yeah, it was about the coldest I ever worked
Average
in.
temperature in the country.
He's like, that's nothing.
Yeah, that's nothing.
Oh man, I thought that was impressive, but
That's like the temperature I go to school at.
minus
Yeah, that's like a
35.
sauna. Oh, it's sweaty.
But do you think that pipelining side job made you as stronger as a person?
For sure.
I think that's harder than military, probably.
Yeah, in some way, I think both of them complemented each other. I know what I really remember, probably the most valuable insight from pipelining was that it showed me that book smarts and university smarts don't actually mean a whole lot in that industry. And how I mean that is you can meet people who are school smart and then they go out to help a welder or a pipe fitter.
They have no clue.
They're no clue.
Yeah.
They're clueless. And that job, and I was one of those people. I mean, I was a little bit more intuitive because I've always had a background of being like really hands-on. So I was good enough that they didn't kick me off right away, but I was still, yelled at for the first couple weeks or months. But I picked up fast. I learned quickly, like, okay, the welder, this is the sequence. If I watch what he does, I should be able to anticipate that he needs a rod now. And as long as you could learn this pattern, they were happy because you were just like, think ahead of what he needs and give it to him. And I noticed that a lot of people coming out of university and college couldn't do that. And so that made me extra aware, and I learned like a bunch of skills on pipelining that I wouldn't have learned from school. And so many of those people that I met out there were brilliant minds. Like the welder I worked with was one of the smartest guys I've ever met. So it's a really different world to be a part of.
I see. One last thing. Let me make a correlation between you going to that pipeline side job, right? And you having that urge to do dirt biking. Is there anything is there a correlation between them?
No, at this point. So the motorcycle thing was, I don't know. I think from like when I was 6 years old or something, when I was riding my bicycle and you like ride over a pop can and it goes like, or you have a hockey card in there or maybe some playing card. I wanted to be on a motorbike and I used to imagine myself going up hills on the motorbike, but I think my parents were kind of anti-motorbike because they never bought me one. And I don't think I was allowed to buy one. So I had to wait. I got my first motorcycle when I left university. Oh, sorry, not university. When I left for university. And that was a street bike. And I went and got training, like a safety course training, and then through the military actually. And then I bought my first motorcycle. So that's when the motorcycle actually happened for me. But at this point, it wasn't until I moved to do my next year of university after pipelining and traveling that I bought a dirt bike. And then that's where the love of dirt biking began.
Yeah. And moving on, right? So on college, right? How would you say? So when did you start kind of having the passion for photography? Well, was it during the college days?
Yeah, I would say it started. Okay, actually, it could probably go back to when I was 12 in some ways, because I remember in Switzerland I was given a camera by my auntie or something, and I used to just take it on field trips. And I really enjoyed. I remember taking photos of school events. So we'd go skiing as a school, or we'd go to the river as a school. I'd take photos on film, I would develop them, and then I'd put them in an album. Like I wouldn't develop myself, I'd send them in for developing. So that's where I think it was storytelling for me. Like I liked to document what I was doing and share it.
Ellen could share some stories about that.
I've tried YouTube videos, I think since 12, 11 or something. I recorded a gaming channel. I was actually part.
Sconix Gaming.
Yeah, Sconex Gaming. I was,
Yeah.
but after that, I recorded a lot. I don't like it, but I slowly built up the skills and I got more confident using and got better equipment. I think this video is better,
Yeah.
and I think it truly kind of shows like the importance of
So
it.
you started your YouTube thing at 12?
I made YouTube videos, I guess, like
Yeah.
recording is or like documentations. I've been journaling since 3 years ago, and I've been like journaling and just putting it out there. Putting it out there took a bit of time because I struggle with social anxiety.
Yeah.
But yeah, um,
That's fantastic. I mean, yeah, the fact that you can get into it so young at this age too, and like have access to the internet and a place to put your content.
True.
Very, very cool.
yeah, it's beautiful. And so in the college days, you studied criminal justice. Um, were there any like so you already told of some cool in between you went to Southeast Asia, right?
Yeah.
How was it like and what did you do?
I think in Southeast Asia, so that's probably also where the dirt biking thing got solidified. Because when I went to Thailand, well, that was where I started my journey. I rented scooters all the time in Bangkok, Koh Phangan, learned how to dive in Koh Phi Phi, full moon party on Koh Phangan, did the typical kind of, that was like the Europe for my generation was you'd go to Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, you do that kind of circle. But I've never been much of a person to like go the same. I hate tourist buses basically. So I will do everything to stay away from group travel. And so the best way to travel for me was by motorbike because you had the ultimate freedom to go anywhere you wanted. U turn like I'm constantly U turning even these days. I see something, let's go there, and I'll just turn around and go. And you can't do that in a car, and you definitely can't do that on a tourist bus. It's so
Yeah.
much harder. So yeah, traveling Southeast Asia was like a fan. I went solo, and it was just I would recommend that to every young person out there. If you can go travel, because what I saw when I became a teacher here in Korea for like 9 years, and I taught at the university level, and so many university students like, oh, I want to travel, but I'm going to finish this first. And then what ends up happening is they go through
Finish, and
university.
they could have a job and then they don't travel.
And they
They
have
have their
kids.
contacts, they don't wanna lose those, everything, and they're already, like, starting to propel themselves into their career, they get the kids or the girlfriend, they don't wanna give it up, and then they ultimately never end up traveling. So I think it's, like, a thing that you have to push yourself to do sooner rather than later, because you'll gain a lot like, I'll never lose those memories, it's worth every penny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of my friends, he really wants to do that and take photography and motorcycle,
Mm.
right? But he's struggling to ask to get the permission from his parents. You were in university level, but I think your parents still had some level of kind of like, because you wouldn't like them if they're really angry at you. So how did you kind of convince, or were they all right with it? Because you said your father was, you know,
They wanted me to go to university, that was definitely to be educated, but other than that, they were amazing in the sense that they're just like, whatever made me happy. So they're like, do what do what you wanna do. There was very little control in that sense. And they definitely encouraged me to travel. They never tried to hold me back from that. They just wanted me to make sure that when I came back from traveling, I'd return to school. That was really the only thing that they were, and they, had I not, they would have been okay with it. Um, but yeah,
So, how much money did it take you to travel? Like,
I
the way you earned was from pipelining, right? So,
yeah,
how much in total did you earn? Or
I think at the time, so I think I saved up $6,000, and that was enough to get me 6 months of traveling through Southeast Asia.
6 months?
Yeah, I did I lived on
That's
about $1,000 a month.
yeah,
Yeah, and that was
oh,
like,
it's 6 months. Okay.
yeah. So $1,000 a month. And that was like traveling well. That wasn't by any means like being super chintzy, but I did, I tried. I like staying in cheap accommodation. Like if I can get $5 a night, and I'd have no AC, just like a pit toilet. Like I thrive on that. I really enjoy seeing how cheap I can go. But I also, if I want to eat something yummy, I'll pay for it. Like I don't mind having. I like to find really cheap meals that are super delicious.
Oh,
Yeah,
and
so
Southeast Asia is like a gem for that.
totally. Yeah, you can
Definitely.
eat for like $3, $4.
oh boy, I love eating a lot, and when I go to Korean restaurants or anywhere in Korea, it's like I already spent $20 just to like an appetizer feeling. You know, I
Yeah.
don't think it'd be a bigger because you're a bigger guy. You
Yeah.
know,
Do you feel underfed when you go eat here, or like you feel like they feed you enough?
I don't feel malnutrition, but it's just I wish I could eat more sometimes, but it's weird. I have a weird dynamic. But yeah,
Like, so wait, if you order, let's say, doenjang jjigae, and
yeah,
they give
yeah.
you the side dishes, when you're done, you're still hungry?
So I get one more thing jjigae. I get extra
Uh,
rice. I get egg and meat
yeah.
because I want to make sure like I want to become bigger. You know,
Yeah.
muscular, be strong.
Huh. I've never felt a shortage like here. I'm always feel I've never ordered more than one meal.
Really.
Yeah,
Same.
weird.
Now,
I
maybe
mean-
it's because like puberty and I'm growing up, I eat more.
I get enough food.
Do they refill? Because they're pretty nice to me. I mean, I gotta say, like the harmonies and stuff when they see me, they're usually, I don't know if they're extra nice because they're just like, here, have some more egg, have some more of this. Do you need more of that? So they'll like refill my bowls.
They'll like give you like additional, but it was banchan.
Yeah,
like, side
banchan.
dishes,
Yeah,
but
just the
everything
banchan.
else is like, hey, you have to pay
Yeah,
if you want. You know?
Totally.
But yeah. It sounds really cool that you managed to do that and your family was supporting of that important thing of you. And
Yeah.
after that you finished college off. And then after that, what did you begin with?
So once I finished, I was in my 4th year of criminal justice, and I just remember that one of my classmates, uh, I think she reached out to me and said like, "Hey, do you want a job teaching English in Korea?" Actually, I remember what it was. My buddy Brandon, this guy from
Yeah.
grade 4, he left and went and taught in Japan with the JET program. And while I was in my last year of school, we had a year of emails. We were like pen pals, him and I, and we'd write each other almost every day and tell stories about what was going on in our lives. And we'd even, we just told each other everything. And it sounded so fun what he was doing. And I'm like, man, I want to do that too. And then I got this offer from this girl who's like, hey, you want to teach English in Korea? And I thought, oh, well, do I? And then I looked at China. I could go to China and teach, I could go to Japan and teach, or I could go to Korea. And I weighed those 3 options, and I decided Korea would probably be the best fit.
Interestingly, actually, my father, when he came here, he had the same exact choice.
Yeah.
You could choose China, Japan, or Korea.
Yeah.
And what was your reason for choosing Korea?
Korea seemed like the middle ground for me. It was, Japan felt like the cost of living was high, the wages were a bit normal, and also the culture I read was a little bit more closed off to foreigners. But I read that when I was doing my research, that in Korea, it was like people were very welcoming, and it was they like to invite you to have some drinks with them and soju, and it was just a little bit more inclusive. So I like that idea.
How about China?
China to me felt, I don't know. I just never had this like desire to go. I've been to China. I've loved visiting this China, but I didn't have a desire to live there at the time. It wasn't. And also I think the wages were considerably lower in China, so I couldn't earn as much either. So Korea was like the perfect middle ground between Japan and China for me.
And when you first came to Korea, right? K-pop's really famous right now. But
Yeah.
Was there K-pop at that time, or
There was, but
huh?
it wasn't this Korean wave that we're seeing now. It was still very much, I think, less known.
Like an inside thing.
Yeah, it was more internal. I don't think K-pop was like, at least it definitely wasn't hot in Canada or USA at the time. Maybe Southeast Asia still, but not like it is today, for sure.
And so you worked as a Korean teacher, English teacher in South Korea. And what was it like? And then after that, what did you transition into? And then like kind of like explain until you go into like the photography part.
Yeah. So I get this job. Funny enough, at the time there was no interview. Like I'm like, okay, so where do I send my resume? Who do I talk to? She's like, no, just come over here. We'll reimburse you for the flight. And I'm like, what? Okay,
Massive thing.
yeah, I'm like, okay. And I came over there, and she picked me up from the airport and showed me where my place was. And I walked in. It was just this like pigsty of an apartment because there were 2 other English teachers living there at the time. This was in a little town called Gumishi, Gyeongseongbukdo. And I got a job teaching at this school called Prime. It was a hagwon. And I loved it because my very first day, they send me into this classroom, and there's 4 boys. They're probably like the bad boys in the school, and they're like 10 or 11. and they start chanting, bad teacher, bad teacher, bad teacher. And I'm like, and I've never taught a day in my life, man. And they just gave me, my mom says I've always been a good teacher. My mom, I do enjoy, like, I really have enjoyed teaching people. So they gave me the books and I learned how to do it. And I taught these boys, and sooner, a month or two later, they were like some of my best students. And I took my job seriously. I liked to have good classes. I liked to teach them well. And the beautiful thing about this job was that it started at like 2 or 3 p.m. and it would end at 8 or 9 p.m. And so there was this whole day that I could kind of do whatever I wanted in the morning. And I think it was having this time as an English teacher that allowed me to explore. So I explored photography way more because I got a camera and now I'm in a foreign country. So I started a blog like teachers did back in the day. And I started writing about my Korean adventures and all the things that were new and novel. And I was taking pictures along with it. This was on a little camera called a Pentax Optio WP. It was like one of the very early digital cameras. And it was waterproof to some degree, which was unusual for the cameras of the time. And so I'm writing these stories and taking these photos, and people are actually reading my blog, like beyond my family. And I'm actually getting comments on there saying like, wow, you write really well and you should submit these to magazines and your photos are really good. And I'm just like, oh, whatever. Like, it's just fun. And basically at alongside of that, I was also doing music production still. So I met this guy named Brian. He was my roommate. He went by the name Swamp Cat. That was his DJ name. And Swamp Cat and I started this thing called Sound Clash, where we would come up with challenges and be like, okay, you got to take this bottle cap and this noise, and then you got to make a song all around this. So we had these like creative competitions. And so, and I had a motorcycle. I bought my first like motorcycle in Korea. So it was kind of these like 4 years for me, roughly, maybe let's just say 2 to 3, where I could just kind of play during the day and then go do my job at night. But I feel like I had more free time than ever to explore the things that I loved. And so that's where I got into photography.
And what were your could you just share one early adventure you had, or early, I guess, something that was highlighted, maybe a comment post or just something that was really like helpful or felt nice?
Yeah. So I remember we used to go to all the festivals because Korea has so many of them, right? Like you'd have the Cherry Blossom Festival, the
Mm.
Mask Festival. So I wrote about a first experience, which was actually going to the Blossom Festival. And we all, like a gang of us, all got on our motorcycles and rode over there. And along the way, we saw like a big fire at some kind of factory or something.
And you were like, yeah.
We got off and we explored it. Yeah, we like parked the bikes and went down around, and then we got back on the bikes. And also in those days, you could kind of break all the rules on the bikes because bikes were just considered renegades anyways. And then we got to this place and we all got a room together. And then I think I ended up going to my first jjimjilbang, and like that was an experience I've never had in my
Really?
life. It just was mind blowing, And so I wrote a whole article about what it feels like as a foreigner to go into a jjimjilbang, which, if the audience doesn't know, is a bathhouse.
Ellen, I remember you mentioned something earlier.
Oh no, we were like, okay, so we usually eat dinner afterwards, but we're like, maybe if you're not used to Korea, we would have brought you to chimichurri.
Oh, yeah.
Sauna.
Yeah.
Sauna or some Mexican or some cool food. We were thinking after.
Oh, I'm down. I'm
Yeah.
down. All three.
All three. Oh, okay.
There's this actually great jjimjilbang out by the mountain in Hongdae there. What's the name of that? Ansan Mountain? I can't remember, but it's like a little mountain. It's like a little old.
Yeah, old is best.
Yeah, it's like the old school jjimjilbang. It's not all pretty. It's like you're almost a little like, oh, I don't know, but it's so fun in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wrote about this, and people like really seem to enjoy those kinds of posts.
Where did you post it?
So have you guys heard of Blogspot?
Yeah, think of. Yeah,
It was kind of like the Instagram of the day for blogging. Everybody who had a blog would pretty much post it to Blogspot. So I used to write. I can't remember if it was Blogspot or Blogger, but I opened up an account there, and then I would write all my stuff, and then I kind of ported that. I developed my own website, and I used to I was pretty geeky, like I was really into computers too. So that was another thing that was kind of going for me, as I was like starting to build websites, and I would make a frame. It's
Yeah.
back when frames were still in HTML, and I'd have a frame in a frame, which ported my blog spot into that. And then we'd post the sound. We used to post the music to, I don't know if it was SoundCloud or something, but I used to host my songs that we were making on a different platform. And I started connecting all these
Yeah.
things into my webpage, which was called Comatose in Korea for some reason.
Comatose.
I don't know why I went with Comatose, but yeah.
Yeah.
Do you still have it?
I think there's like fragments of it still kicking around. Comatose in Korea.
In Korea.com?
Yeah.
But
Oh no, just like Google Comatose in Korea, because it's probably like a .blogspot.com or something like that. There might be like some pieces of it.
No.
Yeah, that's probably. Oh, there's nothing. I've never
Nothing.
seen.
Okay.
Google actually came up with 0 results. I've never seen that
Oh.
happen. Like 0.
But
It is around there somewhere.
and while working on the blog, right? Because a lot of people, I heard that they quit early, like while they're writing blogs or doing whatever. Did you get early traction, or did it take some time before people started like really noticing, or was it just fun for you to do, so you never really thought of it as something important?
It took some time. It feels like, I think back in those days, it was way easier to get traction on everything because there was less noise, right? Like back when I started blogging, it was still not being done a ton. So I had, 15 or 20 like commenters that would come in, and there was a conversation happening, and they would look forward to the next post, and they would actually write comments. It wasn't just, I'm going to sound old and jaded, but it wasn't just like fire, smiley face emojis. It was actual
Like long
communication. Like, yeah. And then, have you heard of a photo platform called Flickr?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So like then there was Flickr, which was basically Instagram. But again, people we would critique each other. We'd say, "Hey, I think this is really great about your photo. I would improve this thing. Have you tried this? Here's a diffuser." And there was like a lot more learning going on. Oh, thanks. I dropped my cap. Um. So yeah. Well, sorry. What was the question?
The question, you were answering the question. It was just the question was, what was the question?
Mm. Did I get traction early on? So
Yeah, yeah.
so yeah, I would say there definitely was some traction happening
Mm,
on there, and that was totally motivational. Like
yeah,
it's nice to know that somebody's looking at your stuff.
yeah.
How did you get your first paid client?
So um
That's a sudden transition.
I will yeah, and I'll back up slightly, cuz so the whole merge, because this is kind of like a key point in the photography career, and it might be useful to your audience. I still remember this guy named David Hobby was on Flickr. So I joined Flickr because I was posting my Korean photos. And this guy named David Hobby was one of the first guys who started using flashes, like camera flashes, but off camera. So he'd take little camera flashes that you put on the camera, he'd take them off the camera, and he'd use a little remote trigger to trigger them. And he would create these like advertising style photos like you'd see in magazines, because he was essentially creating a studio wherever he went. And when I saw that, I was like, man, that's the kind of photos I want to create. Um, and it was the perfect fusion of like geekiness, because you had equipment, gear, you had
Yeah.
batteries, you had to work out lighting ratios, you had gels, you had elastic bands, you had remote triggers. So you had all this technology that needed to work, but then you had the creative side of like, okay, so what do I want to shine a spotlight on the knife that I'm holding in this photo because I'm an evil villain, and then I do like makeup and I get a costume. And so I joined this group on Flickr called 365, where you post a self-portrait every single day for a year. And I resolved to myself that what I would do is I would use these flashes that I ordered. I ordered like Vivitar flashes, which were these big, bulky things.
Mm,
And I said to myself, okay, I'm going to do this every single day. I'm going to create a photo, and I'm going to try to use flash every single day. And what that did is I learned at such an accelerated rate for that year. I pretty much, to this day, that's probably where I learned the most I've ever learned in my life, was just from creating a single image every single day for a year. And I
mm,
remember almost every one of them because I was so into it. I would spend 4 hours a day, like conceptualizing, shooting, editing, planning. and I would make these like photo series. I had this one about this guy called Professor Edge, which was this like evil professor with a knife obsession. And I had one that was like about smoking cigars because I had all these old cigars left over. So I just got playful, like, okay, how can we photograph smoke? Like, and you could just create this whole other world using these lights and finding cool locations, taking the motorcycle out. I went to an abandoned amusement park and made like a horror series.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I really think if you find something like that, you got to like commit to it and just run with it.
What
So
camera did you use for that?
That was a 350.
Oh, that was a 350.
Yeah, it was an EOS 350D, which is the Rebel. So it was like the cheapest entry level camera,
You can get.
and it was honestly like a lot of those photos are as good or better than anything I shoot today on my R5 in terms of quality
Wow.
because if you're shooting with flashes at like f5.6 in a studio like setting, it doesn't really matter. Like you don't need a, you know, fancy camera for that.
So how did you trigger the flash?
There were these things called cactus triggers. So we had to order them. Camera triggers weren't very common then. So you had to order them off of eBay. And they were like, they looked like they were, somebody had hand built them and stuck them together with crazy glue. It was called a cactus cactus wireless trigger. And it had like just a simple on off switch. And they were super unreliable. Half the time they wouldn't fire, or you'd have to use what's called a PC sync cable. So you'd have to like run the cable from the flash into the trigger.
So you went creative on this because it's not people didn't used to do that a lot. But do they do that a lot these days?
Well, now it's so easy because you can like any flash that you buy will just have a wireless trigger it's so much more reliable. It's kind of like the internet's gotten, like you used to dial up and it would, fall out of half the time or whatever. But now it's like everybody sells them. They're cheap and they're reliable. So it's not sketchy anymore.
And you said this is very interesting. You said the photos back then with the camera that's a lot of photographers and people who talk about gear a lot would say, well, of course the picture right now would be better, but you say the picture of the 300D, which is a beginner entry level camera, was better.
Yeah.
What do you like mean by that?
I mean, not only were because I had a concept and a vision, so conceptually they were better than a lot of the stuff that I just shoot without really thinking or planning, but also technically, it was still like a 12 megapixel sensor, which is plenty adequate for social media or whatever you want to post on these days. And because you're lighting it and because you're using your lens usually at like, you're not using a shallow depth of field, you're using like f4, f5, which is like the sweet spot of any lens. I guarantee you would have trouble seeing if I took the same shot on today's camera, you probably wouldn't notice a difference. It's just today's cameras are really like, if you're doing action photography and you want 20 frames a second, wicked. You need a better camera. If you want to blow up a photo to go across this whole back wall, you need a better camera. But if you're shooting in a studio, one shot at a time and planning your shots, you don't need an awesome camera for that.
So it's the person who's holding it, not the gear.
Totally.
Isn't it every time?
It's like what they said, like people will always come up to you and say like, oh, what camera did you shoot that on? Like they'll see your photo, you show them the photo and they say, oh, you must have a really nice camera. And you know what, you know how you answer that? You say, yeah, Shakespeare had a really great pen.
Oh, that's really nice. And yeah. So and after that you began your photography. Did you start off free or paid, and how did it begin?
I'd say it was kind of free. So I think back to your question, way back to your question.
Way back to your question.
First paid gig. It was actually here comes Brandon again. So Brandon and his girlfriend at the time, I offered to do photos of them at one of it was called Hemi Upsong, or what was it? It was like a little palace kind of thing. An Upsong. I can't remember the word for it. Fortress. It was a fortress. And I did some kind of like couple-y photos about them in a sunset, holding hands, love stuff. Because I really liked this place. And there was this cool archway with all these melons hanging off of that. So I had them walk down this thing. Anyways, they shared it on their Facebook. Now we got on Facebook. I put it on my Facebook, which was still kind of new to me at the time. And some of their friends saw it and are like, hey, can you come take photos of us? And that was the first time I ever actually charged money for a photo shoot.
And if you're all right of saying, how much did you charge?
I think it was like $200, and I had to go down to because I had to travel about an hour and a half to Gwangju. I was in Hemi at the time, so I traveled down to Gwangju, shot it was family photos of three of them or four of them,
Yeah.
and she was pregnant, and yes, two a mom, a dad, a kid, and she was pregnant. And so we went I used to do a lot of research. They'd be like, "Oh, like one of our favorite things to do is sit at TV and eat ice cream." So I'm like, "Let's make that photo," because I was still thinking in this 365 zone. So I'm like, set up my flashes and we got them ice cream and they're on the couch and they're like, "Ah," and she's pregnant, and we used to create kind of stories like this around them. So that was oh, and I should add before I started doing those photo shoots, I was actually selling stock photography too. So that was
Mm.
kind of a Getty Images partnered with Flickr. And then for a while there, I was actually making pretty good money selling the images that I had on Flickr as stock photos through Getty. So sometimes I'd get royalties anywhere from 0 per month to like, I think I sold one image that ended up getting me like $3,000
Really?
because
Wow.
and Getty made like $13,000 off of the image because
Whoa.
it was basically a multicultural family, and some pharmaceutical company bought it and put it across their like head office wall, so they had to pay $14,000 or something to
Whoa.
license this image, and then Getty would give you 20% of that.
Whoa. So the photography market is pretty big. It seems like the amount
It
of money flowing in.
stock photography was,
How,
but not anymore.
not anymore.
No.
So it's not lucrative.
No, I personally don't think so, because it's so saturated now, the market, that I gave up on it a long time ago because it was taking me an hour to 2 hours to fill out all the paperwork and keyword it and model releases, and you don't even know if the image is ever going to sell or not, because there's like 60,000 other such images in Getty's database. So
Yeah.
Mm.
I kind of I'm don't like Getty very much, to be honest, but they helped me in the beginning.
And then you start getting your clients soon after, and then you kept getting clients, right? How was the process like, growing bigger and bigger and becoming more?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was still teaching full time, and not even thinking like that I was ever going to become a full time photographer, but I was so into it. Like it was more out of passion than it was any desire to make a living. Or so what I would do is any free moment that I had, I would be blogging these photo shoots on my blog and website. And that started getting traction, and I was pretty decent at like SEO because I'm fairly like logical person, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna name the files like maternity shoot, Gwangju, soul photographer, soul engagement photographer. So I started naming my files, keywording them, and I would just write stories about these shoots. Like, hey, 2 weeks ago, I got a chance to go work with these people in Gwangju. It was so fun. We did this kind of photo shoot, and it was very natural, organic content. And so as a result, actually, Google really, like the Google bot, really liked it. And pretty soon, people were contacting me from the internet, people I had no idea, like, hey, we found your website, and they would submit through my contact form, can you take photos of us? Um, and what basically happened over the span of a few years was got every year exponentially, I would get more and more customers. It started, I think my initially it was like engagements were a really big part. So like I'd photograph couples, I do families, and then I started doing like small events, and then I ended up this guy named Sean hired me to do a British Chamber of Commerce. I'm not sure if that was the first one, but I ended up getting some like slightly bigger events, and then those led to bigger events, and then those
Yeah.
led to bigger events. And I loved, I would say, shoot, like sometimes event photography gets a bad rep because people are like, oh, it's just event photography. But I think it's one of the coolest places to go learn how to do photos, because you have to think fast, you got to be on your feet, you got to be good with people, and you can, every time I shot an event, I would get at least 3 future jobs from it, 2 to
Mhm.
3, because you'd meet somebody and I used to laugh. You'd go to these networking events and people would be paying like $120 to come there. and be a part of it and drink and try to like convince people, give them their business cards. And I was getting paid that
To
to
go
go
there.
there, and
Yeah.
people were seeing me work, and they would come up and say, "Hey, like, holy cow, like, it looks like you're really enjoying yourself right now. Or I saw you lie down on the floor over there when you were taking that photo. Like, what's up with that?"
Yeah.
And then they'd be like, "Can you come photograph my event, or or do you do this kind of photography? Like, do you do that kind of the Four Seasons? Do you take photos of hotels? I thought you were just an event photographer." I'm like, "Of course I do. Come in, we'll interview you, and we need somebody."
So, how flexible are you with your photography?
Like, you mean like physically?
No. Like, what do you portrait photography, or do you do like event photography, hotel photography
I, I
specifically?
I took it all at the
All.
beginning, everything, because it was honestly like everything was in. I wanted to learn everything. So if somebody wanted me to photograph their baby at the time, I was like, cool. I've never
Yeah.
done newborn
And then
photography.
you were like, no more babies.
Yeah, no more babies. After I tried it 3 times, and after the third baby, I was like, no
Okay,
more
no more.
babies. But I've had like crazy stuff where somebody wanted me to photograph like machines in a factory to make sure, like, it was basically an insurance company, and they're like, we're importing these machines. Can you go take photos of them just to make sure they're okay? So that was like zero artistic, but I got to go to a factory and see these like microchip machines. Yeah, so I had a lot of interesting jobs that were, I had a job in Singapore like photographing supercars.
Oh,
They rented them, and okay, engagement client, they hire me to capture their engagement. We're visiting Seoul. Can you take photos of us around Myeongdong? Okay. Hey, I work for a sports car company, rental company in Singapore at the Marina Bay Sands. Do you think you could come photograph a bunch of like photos for our business? Sure. And then ended up going out there and working for them for like 3 days. And then I came out again and worked for them next year.
yeah.
So it's like the ability to like network and if you just say yes to everything in the beginning, you're going to get so many opportunities. And I find too, if you diversify like that, like when one market takes a hit, stock photography fell through. Well, thank God I had a bunch of other stuff going
Yeah.
on. Maybe events die because of COVID. Okay, well, you can still do portraiture. A lot of people will be like niche, niche, niche. And I think that's true. Like, okay, you are the best at taking dog photos. That's all you do. Dog photo, dog photo, dog photo. But I get bored easily. So I couldn't do it. I need to do a little bit of everything. I need to keep learning.
Keep it exciting,
Mm.
And so while doing photography, right? You said you went to the cool event. So when you first got into the like if the event space, because you said the event space is where you got a lot of the opportunities, right?
Yeah.
So you got into it from the SEO and like just putting yourself out there through blogs, right?
Yeah.
So that just shows like how important it is just putting yourself out there, right?
Yeah. You gotta show your work, because I think if you don't have a portfolio that people can find, how are they ever really gonna know what you do? Yeah. So you gotta put it out there for sure.
And what's like a day so while doing photography, right? What do you kind of do right now? Like what's kind of like the scope you work with, and if you're allowed to,
Oh yeah,
some
yeah.
clients you work with.
Like in terms of like what does a day look like, or what is
That was the question after it's gonna be, but like what do you like? So usually like let's say like in a year, right? You would go to that country, usually shoot that, and then like you work with these sorts of like big clients, right?
mm, um it's really different. Like, so when I was in Korea, when I left Korea in 2019, I think I had the most jobs ever, because my business grew very much, like I almost doubled every year. So I shot something like 120 jobs in my last year here, and had one of my best years ever. And that was a year where I got Netflix hired me to shoot their brand new corporate office that they made here. And there were a few other like really good big name gigs.
Which year was that?
That was 2019.
2019. So
Yeah.
right before COVID.
Yeah, right before COVID. Yeah, we moved back to Canada right before COVID. And so like I would be taking everything, but I got to the point in event photography where I was confident enough that like I knew my value, and that's really hard as a photographer, or probably anybody, but photography's weird in that if you came to me and asked me like, "Hey, can you shoot my portrait?" I might be like, "Okay, that's $150." And if a CEO of Netflix comes to me and says, "Hey, can you shoot my portrait?" I'll be like, "That's $1,050."
Yeah.
because it depends on the size of the company, right? Like it's more valuable to them because they're a bigger company. I don't think there's many other jobs that are like that where you produce something that can have such a
Yeah.
like difference in value. And so it's very hard as a freelancer to understand what your value is, and you have to do it a bunch again and again, and
Yeah.
you'll make mistakes and you'll be like, "Oh, I priced too low." Or when you price too high, it's almost worse pricing low than it is high because you're too high and you're like, "Oh, I lost the client because I was probably asking too much."
Mm.
Yeah.
But when you're say a number and then the client's just like, "Okay," you're like, "Oh, maybe I could have asked for more."
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So what's your value right now?
like
Kind of.
for which kind of photography? It just depends. Like, so for example, I feel very confident for event work. I ask $200 per hour. That's what I want. And that might sound expensive to some because yeah, so that means like an 8-hour day, you're getting 1600 USD, right? But you got to remember for a lot of the stuff, like you're putting in 3 hours behind the scenes for every hour. I keep track of all this stuff. Another thing I would totally recommend is track your time religiously. So every time I sit down on my computer, I start a timer and I make a note of whose project I'm working on and what I'm doing because it's the little things. It's like, oh, I just need to book that ticket real quick. And you go in there and you book that ticket. Oh, I just need to write this guy. It's just a text message. And then it ends up being like a back and forth. And there, the ticket and that back and forth just cost you 45 minutes that you never even thought about billing for. And then, you get another project down the road and you realize like, wow, that's not a 2-hour project. That's a 4-hour project if I look at. So you got to like track that time. And yeah, so for every hour of photography, I know that I generally do 2 to 3 hours of work behind the scenes. That's editing,
Mm.
setting up, researching, scouting, researching which computer I have to upgrade to, backing up all my hard drives, upgrading to a RAID system. Like it's just endless. Like it's it's not a luxurious job. People think, oh, you're a photographer, but like 90% of it is just carrying gear around and planning stuff and editing and writing emails and doing all that other stuff.
So there's more in like the back covers than what is usually shown. Because I always also thought like, why are they getting paid so much? But then there's so much work in the back.
Totally.
Yeah.
And most people don't know that. So that's like a hard thing about this job. Like doctors and lawyers, people just know like, oh, they're expensive, they're worth it. But sometimes you feel like as a photographer, you have to explain a lot of the time why you're worth it. And people will still be like, "Ah, I don't get it." But it's like,
Yeah.
well, dude, I have $15,000 worth of equipment with me that I've spent 15 years learning how to use properly so that I can get you a photo of this event no matter what. I'm not going to mess it up. Like you're going to get. Whereas if you bring in some guy, some amateur, and they don't even have a second camera body, and something happens, they corrupt a memory card, that $20,000 event that you just produced, you're not going to have a single photo from it, right? Or wedding or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And you kept growing, and then you're at the point right now doing so moving through Korea and the States usually, right?
I don't
Not States,
do a
Canada.
lot of work in the States. Yeah. States is also tricky because of working visas and whatnot. Um, and I would like to say that I'm like more international, but I have a few key countries. When I was in Asia, I did more work in the Asian area. Right now, what I'm trying to do is build my business in Canada, where I am currently. And that's challenging. It's really challenging because we
Yeah.
went to a much smaller town and business. This is something too, like, everybody talks about like, oh, cultural business practices. And it's business operates in a way that I'm not. I was never. I like to say like I was never an adult in Canada. I went to university and then I left, and so coming back now and being like an actual adult and paying taxes and operating a business and trying to get a mortgage for a house is weird. And yeah, like people here found me because they're like, oh, we're traveling to Korea. We need a photographer. Go on Google, find me because I had top page ranking SEO,
Mm.
and they book me. People where I'm at now, they live there. They're like, well, yeah, we kind of like to go, we're not sure yet. Maybe next week. Oh, yeah. People can just delay install because there's no time commitment that they have to.
Mm.
And I don't have the search ranking in my hometown of Victoria. nor are there a lot of big companies or businesses going to Victoria to do huge events and big productions and that kind of thing. So it's a challenge.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a different frontier,
totally.
So, what was your most recent client?
if you're allowed to say.
Yeah, of course.
Well, like a lot of my recent stuff has been proposals actually, which I really enjoy. So a guy wants to propose. Usually, it's not always. I've had girls propose to girls, guys propose to guys. I've never had a girl propose to a guy yet. If you're anybody's watching, please contact me to photograph a girl proposing to a guy. I would love that. But yeah, so I help them kind of execute their plan, and sometimes they don't have a plan, and then I become a proposal planner,
Oh,
and I have to like think up like some super romantic thing for them to do. I've
Do you charge for that too?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's a charge because it's the most. You have to almost be like a spy. Like you gotta. I've had to organize
oh, so your
musicians.
investigator
Yeah,
bachelor's degree
investigate.
helped you out.
Totally, totally. And then you have to go scout the locations, and then stuff happens. Like suddenly they start doing construction on the very place that you wanted them to propose, or there's a protest happening there. So you have to have backup plans, contingency plans, satellite imagery, paths where they need to
Yeah.
go. Like everything has to be planned, but I like that. I really like planning.
So you're more. So it's interesting because you said you're kind of more like you're creative, but you're also like planning in
I
some
love
ways.
planning. Yeah. Actually, I really like making a good plan and having like a workflow and
Yeah.
fallbacks and stuff.
I heard this quote like the most like so most artists they require a lot of discipline so they can like do the thing they enjoy in the little space they have and
Hmm.
fully just do what they like to do. And yeah, and the time's kind of running out for today.
Yeah.
But so I there's other cool stories I want to ask because one of the blogs, but I have a friend and he wants to be a photographer, just exactly like he wants to travel. He's around my age, a sophomore in high school,
Hmm.
and he's asking. I'm doing mostly street photography and developing my own style. I want to reach out to photographers and kind of get to know them. And how should I ask for collaboration or something more so that I can go out with them during the shot and build my skill?
Mm. Let me make sure. So he's wondering how to reach out to photographers and collaborate with them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
internships or
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first off, you want to regard all photographers as friends and colleagues because I feel like sometimes it's very competitive out there and it doesn't need to be. There's enough work for everybody. And some of my closest friends are my biggest competition, I like to say, because we all are going for the same jobs, but we all work together. And there's been times where I go on vacation and I give all my work to somebody else and they go on vacation. So it's good that he wants to do that. And I think the only way you can do that is really like write them an email or yeah, probably email because you don't
yeah,
want to like cold call right away. And make sure you've researched what they do and what style. And I think that's really important is that when you contact them, you show them that you've actually looked at their work because they might be getting like 5 or 6 or 10 of these emails, who knows. And if it's just a generic like, hey, I really like your work and I'd love to, can we work together, they might just be like, I don't know. But if you like go into their portfolio
And
and comment on
specifically
a
identify.
specific body of
yeah.
work, yeah, I would do that. And then kind of ask for nothing. Like, don't say, I could do it, at low pay or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, just be like, I love what you do, this specific thing. And maybe even identify like a couple, like 2 to 3 things that you're like skills that you would bring or how you could be helpful. Or maybe even just like, these are the things I would love to learn as we're working together. So it shows that you're focused and dedicated and
So like
actually
show
wants it.
genuine like care for you and like show that they actually care. Because if they wouldn't care to write an email, then why would you care about them?
Yeah. Yeah, like I think somebody, a photographer who's at a point where they're maybe just like, man, I need some extra help, somebody to carry my bag or whatever, they wouldn't be so discerning and just be like, sure, whatever, like come help me. But I think if they're truly a great photographer, they're gonna have so many of these coming in that you have to differentiate yourself
Yeah,
somehow. I mean, I get. I'm by no means a great photographer. I'm not very well known, but I've had a lot of interns. I've had about maybe 15 people, 20 people contact me and ask like, "Hey, can we work for you?" And it's only the ones I disregard any email that just seemed like a generic mail out and hadn't like the person didn't even take the time to look at anything I did and then focus on the ones who actually had a personal introduction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I also like to look at their work too. So that's like if somebody reaches out to me like this guy,
Yeah.
he should refer that photographer to his work or include some sample images or something because that person probably wants to get a not like, hey, can you go look at my work? Just like, hey, if you're interested in seeing some of what I do or what skills I
Yeah.
have, here's my Instagram or here's my website or here's a PDF that I attached so that they can because instantly when I look at somebody else's portfolio, I can get a feeling of like what their skill level is and maybe I want somebody at a certain skill level, like, okay, he understands light. I need him on my shoot.
Mm.
I hope that's helpful. Trying to be helpful.
Yeah. Um, and just like a general advice you'd say, just for like, because we usually ended off with a street advice history with like a short description kind of explaining of anyone who'd like to aspire your kind of life and your kind of success in your field.
Okay, three advice. One, it's like it really is the time that you put in the 10,000 hours thing. Like
Mm.
that was my 365. And I'm sorry because everybody's heard it before, but there's no shortcut. It's just like you gotta put in mad hours and just keep working at it no matter what. Even if you think it's not going anywhere, just show up every day, take a photo every day, and keep learning. So that'd be like my first one. My second one would be jump on every opportunity you can, because you never know what kind of contact that's going to make. So, like, if somebody asks you to photograph like birthday parties were probably the worst. I actually really hated
Oh.
being asked to go shoot.
You
But
just don't like kids.
in my early days, I really liked kids, but I was like, like it could be an adult birthday party even. And I was just like, oh, really, a birthday party? Because it just sounds so like lame. Like I shot a birthday party. I don't know,
It's like
but
in your bio, I shoot birthday
I
parties,
did
you
it.
know?
I did it. I went out. Somebody asked me to shoot. I'm like, you know what? Because you treat every single shoot, even if birthday parties suck or like corporate events can be some of the worst. You go to like I used to shoot crypto corporate events when
Oh.
crypto was big, and it's like in some lousy basement with terrible lighting and like a paper on the wall with the title, and like compared to a Chanel event, it's the absolute
Oh.
bottom of the barrel in terms of how it looks, right? And looks are everything. It's photography. And but you go to this and you'd be like, okay, what can I do? I'm gonna hold a wine glass in front of my lens to make this speaker and give it like a little bit of an aura. Like you push yourself to be creative in those situations. So don't just filter out everything that you think is gonna suck because you'll probably learn something going and doing those jobs. Don't be picky in the beginning. Just shoot everything. If I had okay, advice number 3 then. Well, this will lead into 3. I have this great, I think it's a 4 kind of I thought it was a triangle, but it's more like a square where I base every single job offer on these things. How much does it excite me? Does it
Mm.
excite me? Am I enthusiastic? Am I going to learn something through it? 2, how much is it going to help my portfolio? Is it like something I can put in my portfolio visually that I don't have that's going to help me grow my business? Or is it a client that I can add to my client list that's going to like reflect well? Third one is I'm already forgetting my own thing. Pay obviously comes into there. So I guess it's pay. And fourth is connections, like what kind of networking opportunities are going to happen. So if there's a job that pays nothing, they're like, we want you to do this for free, but I'm going to make some awesome networking connections and I'm going to have like a client name in my list that like, oh, I got to work for so and so. I'll do it. And vice versa. If it pays awesome, but all those other 3 suck, but I'm going to make a bunch of money photographing a crypto thing in a dingy basement that
Why
nobody
not?
even knows, I'll do it. So like if you have those 4 pillars and you figure out what value it is, then it's not very hard to decide whether or not you're going to take the job. So
Yeah.
that'd be like my 4th piece of it, 3rd piece of advice.
Yeah, well, it was our pleasure for hosting you,
Yeah,
and thank you very much.
it was great to meet
Guys,
you.
yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much for having me on. It feels pretty special to get to just talk and
Uh,
share
yeah.
everything with you. So thank you.